Star Citizen is bigger than you think. Yes, it's a space game. Yes, it's about spaceships, but if you ask players which game they come from, you'll get all sorts of different answers. I've done it for years on my podcast, in my org, and on my Discord server. And as many different types of players come to Star Citizen, they all seem to be drawn by one thing: the scale. The promise of working whatever job you want in whatever scenario at a huge scale with 0 loading screens. And believe it or not, it's becoming a reality. You can't take any job in space, but from bounty hunting to mining, combat medic to dropship pilot, ship engineer to drug smuggler, you can take a number of roles in the game right now that will be expanding in big ways over the next couple of years. So today I'm going to give you part 1 of every role you can take in Star Citizen at this moment, and how they'll continue to change this year and in the future. And all supporters here on Patreon and on Twitch can already tune into part 2 of this series, which covers the pilot, medic, and other combat-focused roles. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. The miner is a workhorse. Long stints out in the black or on some distant terrestrial surface keep miners mostly away from population centers. When they are back to the home base, it's generally a deep space refinery station with few souls around. But this isn't a boring job. No, miners prefer to call it relaxing. Sitting in a ship charging a rock with just enough heat to crack it open without losing the valuables inside stays fresh when you have to account for rock mineral breakdown, mass, volume, resistance, and instability. There's a lot to consider in this profession, but you also have access to a myriad of tools, gadgets, and consumables that can be attached to and exchanged amongst your ship and the rocks you're mining. And of course, if you're not shy, you can also bring some friends along with you to get those larger rocks. The minerals mined can also be refined for additional value at said space stations, and soon, hopefully, player-owned refinery ships. While mining is well developed and a proper role that can carry you forward through the game, there's still plenty more that still needs to be developed. Resource scattering and spawning have a long way to go, in addition to the scanning systems that allow us to exploit them. With on-site refining still lingering behind with refinery ships, the mining activity is broken up quite a bit by the trip back to the refinery station, especially once we move on to frontier systems like Pyro. Large-scale mining doesn't even exist in a design document yet. The RSI Orion will require an entirely new form of mining given its scale, likely with persistent deposits. We're also hoping for some form of bore mining in planetary surfaces, but that has not been confirmed. Finally, the new RSI Arastra will offer a new experience in mining with larger crews and an onboard refinery to raise the value of your mined goods. But again, we'll have to wait for that ship to actually be made as it's still in concept. The Salvager had a better 2023 than anybody else. Starting the year off with absolutely no gameplay, things quickly changed with the addition of physical cargo that can be looted from ships and sold for money, as well as the ability to scrape the hull off ships for material to sell or craft with. These weren't the true salvage gameplay many were looking for, but in the next update, component and weapon removal were added. This is still the least utilized form of salvage, with most ships not even having removable components and weapons being vastly underpriced to the point where nobody even wants to take them. But when it does work, it represents probably the most lucrative form of salvage in its infancy. And once ships start to get updated, this component retrieval is going to be a big part of salvage and repair. Finally, at the end of the year, structural salvage was added to the game, completing 3 of the 4 expected categories of the profession. While it's still far from a finished mechanic, it presents yet another way for salvage crews to work together. Currently, this allows players to sit out in space on a hulking salvager disposing of the wreckage in the verse, both game and player created. It takes teamwork and coordination across salvage and cargo ships and offers the most complete multi-crew experience in the game at the moment. But with salvage drones, salvage charges, and the Maelstrom damage system due in the future to make salvage a much more visceral and skill-based experience, there's a lot more work to be done here. As a courier, life isn't so bad. You get a call, receive some coordinates, pick up a few boxes, and make sure they get where they need to go. This is one of the best professions for newcomers. It requires no buy-in, no combat, no real know-how of locations, and minimal understanding of ship flight. You won't make much money, but you will progress through reputation, see new locations, and learn how to fly. And this profession is going to expand quite a bit this year to include larger cargo hauls and specialized cargo as we saw at CitizenCon, though it's still unclear how this profession will fold into cargo hauling and trading, which is much more defined. Your cargo hauler and your trader are two different individuals. Cargo hauler is picking up the goods, keeping them safe, and getting them from point A to point B. They fly on a contract. They don't put any personal risk into the haul except their own skin. This is very similar work to the courier role. The trader goes a step further though, sourcing materials, finding the best prices, possibly hoarding materials in their own persistent hangar until those prices are more agreeable, and defining the trade routes with the highest profitability. Many players do this already in-game, all across the starting star system of Stanton. I actually spoke about this in a recent video on my podcast with Sgellian. There are many ground and space-based locations around the game with different inventories. Some consume more and some produce more. Pricing for certain items do change over time, which traders can keep an eye on to try and get a good deal, but not really enough for it to be very entertaining. There's still a lot of work to be done on the supply and demand model for the game and the overall simulation. I made a video or two on this last year that'll explain how this economy works, and we just jumped into what could happen with this system this year in a recent stream. I'll leave that link down below for you. But long story short, cargo haulers and space truckers are going to have some of the most interesting and complex gameplay this game has to offer. When I say logistics, I could mean a lot of things. My org, GII, calls this role the box monkey, but I think the jury is still out. Essentially, this role is all about handling objects. In Star Citizen, everything is physically interacted with. Weapons, armor, items, cargo, it all needs to be picked up and transported to where it needs to go, save for the temporary inventory holdover. What this means is for every miner, salvager, repairman, refiner, FPS squad, or other profession that needs to move something, you'll probably want a person handy with a full-size tractor beam. A lot of time can pass when cargo consolidating, and the logistics of multi-crew, multi-ship operations in space, on various planets, and in transit will stress you out when things get going. Trust me. On top of that, certain types of cargo will be sensitive to temperature, kinetic energy, and even other objects in proximity. So a logistics worker will have to pay a lot of attention in the hauling profession to how they're placing cargo and how they're storing goods. While you won't have to be a master of the tractor beam in this game, those who like to figure out how cargo moves, where it fits, and what makes the most sense in each space, the logistics workers, are going to see a huge expansion in their gameplay as professions like refining, rearm and repair, and engineering introduce new interactions to players in the next couple of years. This is one of those jobs that's going to benefit from every other role getting gameplay. Engineering can be kind of similar. Much like piloting or logistics work, this is a wide-reaching set of mechanics. One that you can choose to take part in for a tip-top shaped ship, or one that you can ignore entirely and let others handle for you, like the general rest and relax service station. This is because as you use your ship for mining, flying, fighting, salvaging, or anything else, you're using power, generating heat, consuming air, and making emissions. All of these things are taken into account when running your ship. Too much heat and stress can lead to glitches and malfunctions over time. Too many people in a certain room can drain your air supply in that room. Damage left unchecked can start fires. And those fires can also drain the air in your room. When it comes to engineering gameplay, you'll be able to fix malfunctions, repair items, shift resources around your ship, vent compartments, turn systems on and off, and more. You'll also be an active part of ship prep, making sure components are tuned to run as demanded, and making sure to equip fresh fuses to avoid major catastrophe later. Engineering is going to be a major part of large ship gameplay in Star Citizen, and a small part of even small ship gameplay. It's another topic that I've covered in videos a few times over the past year, and one we'll need to talk about a lot more before it comes out, because there's definitely a lot here for industrial players. Racing is actually a really old part of Star Citizen, but a part that only became widely popular in the last year. Ship racing in space and in atmosphere received their first official offerings in-game, with new tracks added subsequently both in the PU and in Arena Commander. Players can place on the top of leaderboards, race against one another, and very commonly race in community-hosted events such as the upcoming Daymar Rally. Our own org, the Garden Interstellar Initiative, is actually at the top of almost every racing leaderboard right now, as our players continue to hone their skills and lap meet in just about every racetrack there is. But racing is going to be a huge part of Star Citizen going forward. As a living universe, Star Citizen has a multitude of sports, and ship racing is actually one of the biggest. The 13-planet Ellis star system is driven entirely by racing tourism, and the reputation, fame, and money one can earn from working up the ranks in missions and leagues across different star systems in the future may all be worth it if you're the racing type. This may sound like more effort than it would be to put racing into a space sim, but trust me, it's not. Racing is going to be a huge part of Star Citizen, and anybody who wants to get into space racing should definitely be taking a look. Granted, for now, you'll just be running some racing missions around your current star system, Stanton. Columbo, Sherlock Holmes, Nancy Drew, Jessica Fletcher, or my personal favorite, Sean Spencer. Everybody has a favorite detective in some fictional universe. Star Citizen allows you to take on your own cases in hopes of finding the truth, or at least some good money. Currently, the choices are actually quite limited, with a few voice-acted missions here and there, with a specific one at Kovalix Space Station standing out. But the gameplay type is backed by a strong team, who has been developing various modular investigative missions over the last couple years. These are actually the most complex missions that are being built for Star Citizen. They can also be used as modules mixed amongst one another and nested inside of other missions like deliveries, bounty hunting, and even some criminal gameplay to add much more narrative and slow-paced gameplay to Star Citizen. These investigative sequences will be open-ended with little clues and atmospheric storytelling guiding players towards a conclusion, but they specifically will be trying not to hold your hand. Our last update on this gameplay was a while back, so I think it may have been put down for a bit, and we can't be sure where it is in development, but I'm pretty confident this is something that we will be seeing in-game by the time 4.0 is hitting the live persistent universe. The holy grail of space games, arguably the hardest game career path to define and sell. Many believe this is a role that should focus on finding jump points, undiscovered planets, and new alien species. And while that might be the case in the future to a limited degree, the fact is exploration is already in the game. It's just not very supported. Currently, players can track down mining deposits and derelict ships that can be processed for credits. As a team, this allows some players to handle the exploration and surveying side of the job, while salvagers and miners can stick to what they like. There are a couple of reasons why this just isn't enticing for players right now though. There's still very little logic to where you can find things, so it's not intuitive locating new shipwrecks. There is no crafting or base building, so the need for resources isn't strong enough for miners and salvagers to decide they don't have the time to handle the searching part themselves. And the biggest of all is no ability to place and share markers on the map. This means workarounds in order to get properly paid for your finds and little guarantee you're selling to an actual trustworthy person. But there's also touring. Last year, I was able to go on a trip with Curvature to see some interesting solar effects. And this year, actually on the day of this video releasing, I'll be going on The Experience, a closed Invite 890 jump tour of the sites of the verse. And while it might not seem like a big deal now, their first public showing is already sold out. So when we start expanding to different star systems with different nebula and interesting sights to see when players don't want to risk their own ships or their own credits or don't want to source their own security, these sorts of touring groups have a realistic game loop to dive into, and this is already being done by many groups in the game right now. Exploration has a ways to go, but it's very close to being reality with the upcoming star map changes and hopefully with a revamp to scanning to follow shortly after. But the idea of setting out into space to find the valuable desires of others or the most beautiful sights that they want to see is a very real one in this game. And a future with deep space probing on a system-wide scale, the ability to quantum travel at will in any direction, a future of much more interesting star systems to look at, and collaborative data management and sharing, this is a profession that will attract many to the game, eventually. While part 2 of this series, currently available to supporters, will be releasing publicly later to cover the rest of what's currently possible in the game, there's much more planned even then that players will be able to try for a bit, pursue as a career, and even master above all others. Refining, repair, data running and hacking, farming, and of course base building will all feature some level of depth that allows players to specialize their playstyle more. But there is still plenty of work to be done until these things are all in the game and functioning. Right now, the game just isn't ready for most players to play, even if these things are up for offer. But if you'd like to keep getting updated on how the progress is going and when it might be ready for you to jump in, this channel's got you covered. And if you want regular exclusive videos about Star Citizen, our supporters on here and Patreon get those and other benefits for making this possible. And if long-form content is your thing, you can also check out my second channel, Space Tomato 2, where we host our podcasts, deep dives, and development overviews. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.